Lamar Jackson has unfortunately gotten plenty of hate over the course of his NFL career, and an NFL insider might have revealed a big reason why.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome in to the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens WR. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. The biggest stage of world soccer is here. Let there be goals on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com to get started now. On today's show, Eric DeCosta spoke on 105.7 The Fan, gave a lot of updates, and we talked about Nnamdi Madubuike's situation a little bit from what DeCosta had to say, but I want to get Sam Njoku from the Ravens Talk podcast and Locked On Ravens Squad show's opinion on it. So we'll talk about that in the final part of the show. In the second part of the show, Steve Smith Sr., he weighed in a lot on the Ravens wide receiver group from Zay Flowers, Rashod Bateman, Jacoby Lane, Tez Walker. We'll talk about that. But in the first part of the show, I think an NFL insider might have just revealed a big reason why Lamar Jackson gets a lot of the hate that he does across the league. And we obviously, Sam, saw that the list that the NFL coaches and executives and scouts voted on, he was number 5 there. That's kind of where I'm going with it, but it might just be consensus, not only across the league, but maybe people around the league and how they feel about it. So just a couple of weeks away from training camp, we're slowly but surely getting there. And, it's list season. It's been a heck of a week for lists. And it's kind of pushed me, if I wasn't there already, which I was, it's pushed me all the way into, all right, let's just get this over with. Let's get to training camp. Let's go.
Yeah, that's me too. I'm like, man, these lists, back to back to back lists, they're just trying to squeeze every little bit of content they can before the actual football starts. I'm ready to get there, and I think there's no better time to get there than right now, especially considering a lot of the Ravens hate, Lamar Jackson hate, especially that seems to be out there.
And we're going to talk about that because, again, lots of lists disrespecting Lamar Jackson. And again, it's nothing new, unfortunately, for Lamar Jackson. But I do think that comments from Jeremy Fowler, who is an NFL insider over at ESPN, it kind of shed light to me on why Lamar gets all this hate and kind of the consensus around the league. But it's more so about Joe Burrow and kind of how the league views quarterbacks. And so Jeremy Fowler was on First Take, and he was asked about Joe Burrow's placement over Lamar Jackson on this list. And Jeremy Fowler on, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson said, quote, "So when it comes to winning in the NFL, it's all about playing in the pocket, being a precision passer, and that's Joe Burrow. He's probably the very best in the league at that, so he kind of gets a pass." And it's interesting because some guys are injured, they don't get a pass. We can get to the Jaden Daniels of the world that were top 5 last year. Now all of a sudden they're not even on the list. Burrow, for whatever reason, gets that pass, but it's because of what he can do and take over a game. Like, you talk to coaches and they're like, he's not in a system. He is the system. He's the guy you have to stop. He gets the ball out. He figures you out. The closest thing to Tom Brady. That's why he's above Lamar Jackson, despite Jackson's great success in the league. And apparently, Jeremy Fowler also here said, quote, on Joe Burrow, "When I talk to people around the league, they feel like he's a quarterback's quarterback," which I don't even really know what that means, but that's what Jeremy Fowler said. This is crazy to me, though, because, is Lamar Jackson not a system? Did we not see Joe Flacco take over that offense with Joe Burrow and, consistently lead them to, 40, 50-point games? Again, I'm not trying to trash Joe Burrow here, right? He's a phenomenal quarterback. It's kind of unfortunate these lists bring out well, now we have to compare guys and try to discredit. No, I'm not trying to do that. But to me, it feels like, Sam, at least from Jeremy Fowler's comments, I'm curious if you have the same opinion as me, that it just feels like the league or people around it just value Joe Burrow's play style over Lamar Jackson's. And Jeremy Fowler didn't say this outright, but what the feeling I got was man, Lamar Jackson, all this running around stuff and dual threat ability and all, that's not how quarterbacks are supposed to be played. And if that's the case, that is absolutely ridiculous because Lamar Jackson has defined what it means or redefined what it means to be a quarterback. But, when he was talking about Joe Burrow with the precision passer, and no, he's the very best in the league at that, playing in the pocket. What have we heard? All the consistent criticisms of Lamar Jackson when people want to criticize him. It's, he can't throw from the pocket. He can't stand in there, and he's proven them wrong. But what's kind of your take on Jeremy Fowler's comments there? And does it kind of give you any inclination of what's the feeling around the league on Lamar Jackson and maybe his play style?
Oh yeah, it slowly solidifies exactly what I believe to be the case, and it has been the case since Lamar Jackson was drafted, is that people are still not able to shift their mindset to what the QB position is. It's still who's the next Tom Brady, who's the next Peyton Manning, all of the top quarterbacks that we talk about every time we talk about the greats, all stationary quarterbacks. Some have some ability that can make some moves inside of the pocket, but rarely do you see dual threat quarterbacks get that type of respect. And I always go back to these three words that I hear time and time again to this day in regards to Lamar Jackson. It's not sustainable. Lamar Jackson can't sustain his level of play if he's going to be a dual threat quarterback. That is why this upcoming season with Declan Doyle is going to be so vital to kind of push the narrative out the window. Of course, with Lamar, another narrative will take its place, but being more of a quarterback that's having to deal damage through the air as opposed to being a dual threat. I'm sure Declan Doyle still has a plan for Lamar Jackson to utilize his legs. You can't take out your greatest weapons asset by not having him be a dual threat quarterback, but this is going to be an offense that's going to be much more tailored to a passing QB. It's going to be more about what Declan Doyle does in regards to kind of what happens when there's a situation where, you know, the quarterback's not running the ball. There's not really a mesh point with the running back and quarterback going at it. So I think there's going to be much more of a quarterback-friendly offense for Lamar Jackson, but to kind of push the point towards Joe Burrow, it doesn't make much sense. Joe Burrow, yes, is he phenomenal? Is he great? Is his pocket presence the best in football, in my belief? Yes, he is, but he is not the system. He is in a system that works well for him. It's very easy to have success with two number one receivers in T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. We talked about that with Joe Flacco. Lamar Jackson, in fact, no other quarterback in the top 10 list, or in our belief, top 5 QBs have two number one receivers year in and year out. Is kind of frustrating if I'm Joe Burrow that I still can't get to the promised land with this type of weaponry at my disposal. But I'm not sure if Joe Burrow is the system. If he is, then Lamar Jackson is the system times 2, because nothing happens with this Ravens offense, regardless who the OC is, regardless what the philosophy is, regardless what the play call is, without Lamar Jackson making magic.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I got to give credit to Tyler Huntley for coming in and giving the Ravens a couple wins last year, saved their season a couple times before it ended up going awry and they didn't make the playoffs. But it's very much not the same. And, you know, there's no player in the league that can replace Lamar Jackson. And, you know, I even remember conversations about Jake Browning, which I thought were a little crazy. Like, I'm like, okay, Jake Browning is not as good as Joe Burrow, not even close. Let's not. And neither is Joe Flacco, by the way. But it's like, these conversations pop up and then people keep one set of energy with Joe Burrow and then another set of energy with Lamar. And that's kind of the problem for me, especially with the health thing, where Joe played in 5 less games than Lamar did last year. Everybody wants to knock Lamar for being injured and being banged up in the season that he had. Yet, you know, Joe Burrow, it's like, it's the double standard. Ryan Clark called it out earlier in the week. Actually, a lot of former players have kind of called out and they're like, why is Joe Burrow so high on this list, or like on these lists? Like, and wherever he's ranked on the NFL top 100, I mean, that's going to be a conversation point in itself. And I also think it's very funny, Sam, that, you know, Jeremy Fowler was like, he's the closest thing to Tom Brady. And, you know, whether that was him or just what he was talking with coaches about. And then, but it was the picture that Brady posted of he and Lamar, with Brady saying, "You're next to Lamar." And so I think that's like, if Brady's saying that, then I got to trust what Tom Brady is saying there. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Again, Fowler's comments to me say that the league is, like you said, still not ready to shift what the quarterback position actually is, when whether people like it or not, like, it already has. Like, we see, so, and it's not just Lamar Jackson, right? Like, you know, there have been dual threat quarterbacks for, you know, ever. But I think that what Lamar Jackson has done has been transformational in so many different ways. But again, I just think that the league wants the quarterback position to be played a certain way. And I'm sorry, but it's not what it is. Lamar, as long as you pick up the yards and you score points, I don't care how you play. You can run the ball 15 billion times and throw it once and you score, and that's cool with me. You get the 6 points. But it does kind of, it like discredits Lamar Jackson, and not just Lamar, but some of these other dual threat quarterbacks. Again, I'm not saying Joe Burrow is not great, because he is, but you have to keep the same energy with these guys, because again, like, it's not fair when you place one guy on a pedestal who the narrative you're trying to put out against other guys, that guy you're putting on the pedestal actually is the worst of the bunch. In this case, Joe Burrow with the health situation.
Yeah, I don't get it. It feels like Lamar missed 4 games last year, and Joe Burrow missed 9. Joe Burrow routinely gets injured. I know the mindset is, well, Lamar Jackson's going to get hurt because he's taking more hits, but that doesn't really seem to be the case with Lamar, and it definitely doesn't seem to be the case with Joe Burrow. So I'm not sure why Lamar Jackson continues to get this type of grief when Joe Burrow is dealing with the same thing. I'm not sure why people are continuing to put Joe Burrow on this pedestal, where besides making one trip to the Super Bowl, Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow have a very similar career path in terms of postseason success. Lamar Jackson obviously has more MVPs, more first-team All-Pros, because Joe Burrow has none of that. I just don't understand this notion to keep pushing the Joe Burrow agenda. Now, Joe Burrow had a great 2024 season statistically. In fact, it wasn't for Lamar Jackson's 2024 season, it would have been overshadowed. Wouldn't have been overshadowed. He probably would have been in the running for MVP had that Bengals team made the postseason. But regardless of that, Joe Burrow really hasn't shown to be able to take that next step to be that top QB. Now, I feel like it's the same situation with Justin Herbert. A lot of people are waiting for Justin Herbert to take that step, but I think that people are hanging on. Joe Burrow has the weapons. Joe Burrow has the skill set. He's just going to, this is the year he's going to put it all together. With Lamar Jackson, I think people are saying, well, he has all this talent around him. He has the great coach. He has the great GM. If not now, then when? I don't know if that's necessarily fair for Lamar Jackson, but it is going to be the case with Lamar. We now know what the criteria is. Until Lamar Jackson shows it in the postseason, these type of comparisons, this type of disrespect, unfortunately, will continue.
And again, it's what Fowler was saying about Burrow gets a pass because of, the things that he can do. But I'm just like, okay, well, doesn't Lamar Jackson do those things as well? But Burrow's the only one that gets the pass. I don't get it. And then again, when it comes to winning in the NFL, it's all about playing in the pocket, being a precision passer. First of all, Lamar can do that, but it just feels again like the league is lagging behind what the quarterback position actually is, assuming that is what the league's thought process is. And it's not necessarily shocking, right? Like this has been a thing for years where it's felt that way. They're like, oh, well, that style isn't like what quarterback is, but it is. Like it literally is, and it has been. And there's nothing you can do about it. Like Lamar Jackson is here. These dual threat quarterbacks are here, and there's still room for that. Just the stationary quarterbacks who want to stay in the pocket, but that's not the be all end all of what the quarterback position is. And so, that's the thing. But, if Fowler talking about it's because Burrow gets the pass because of what he can do and taking over a game and, he gets the ball out, figures he out. Like, okay, does nobody else in the league that gets injured also do that? Like, and Lamar has the accolades and, they want to throw the playoff narrative out there. Guess when the last time Joe Burrow made a playoff? So it was 2023 when they lost in the AFC Championship game. So yes, Joe Burrow's made the Super Bowl. I get it, but he has the same amount of Super Bowls as Lamar Jackson has. But, they want to push that playoff narrative for Lamar Jackson, but not Joe Burrow. So again, it's disappointing and upsetting to me that we have to have these conversations and kind of like try to discredit other really great quarterbacks, because I really do have a lot of respect for Joe Burrow and what he brings to the table. But it's just like the hate that Lamar Jackson gets is unlike any other. And again, these comments kind of show that if this is the thinking within league circles or people around the league, kind of exposes a truth that I feel like a lot of people already kind of had an inclination that was a thing already, which is kind of unfortunate there. So coming to the second part of the show, we'll talk about Steve Smith Sr. weighing in on the Ravens wide receiver group. He had a lot of interesting comments on them. So stay tuned, plenty coming up on the show. This episode is sponsored by FanDuel. On the biggest stage in the world, FanDuel is changing the game because sometimes your player gets subbed off and your bet goes with them. Not anymore. With FanDuel Super Sub, if your player is subbed out, your bet stays in. That's right. If your player leaves the match, your bet continues on with the substitute. So you're still in it until the final whistle. In matches like these, anything can happen, and now your bet can go the distance. Let there be goals this summer on FanDuel. Right now, obviously, it's the World Cup final, Spain and Argentina. Right now, Spain at -150 on FanDuel, Argentina at +130. I think it should be a pretty awesome game. And there's nothing worse than having a great pick going and watching your player get pulled in the 60th minute with super sub. That bet doesn't die. It goes the distance with the sub. Let there be goals this summer on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/LOCKEDON to get started now. Locked on Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher, Sam Njoku still here with you, talking Ravens football on this Purple Friday edition of the show. We're getting close to having actual Purple Fridays with Ravens football back, but of course, it's always Purple Friday here on Locked on Ravens. Thanks so much for being here and making Locked on Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day on the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Now the #1 sports podcast network. We have it covered here with 5 days a week plus more daily Ravens coverage and content twice per day, Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern time, plus bonus episodes, just the reactions, watch alongs, the squad show, and the Everydayer Club. We have so much content here for you on Locked on Ravens. Sam, Steve Smith Sr. obviously played in Baltimore, one of the best receivers the Ravens have had suit up for them. He was on the 89, his 89 podcast or show, himself and James Palmer. We're talking about the wide receiver group for Baltimore. And there's a lot in here about whether it be Zay Flowers, Rashod Bateman, Jacoby Lane. And look, when Steve Smith speaks about the wide receiver position, I think you got to listen. And I want to talk about a couple of the different things that he said with you, starting off with Zay Flowers, where, you know, they were talking about it. And the quote was, quote, "He is the #1 wide receiver. Can he be a true #1? Doesn't matter if he can't or he can. He is your #1 wide receiver, and he will be the #1 wide receiver for the Baltimore Ravens. He can play, but you got to have a little bit creativity and not have all that space and clutter and having everything be predictable and confusing in the hashes. You got to get them outside of the hashes. And when you look at this wide receiver group, they have to play outside of the hashes because these guys are guys who excel run after the catch. Excellent route runners if you can get the ball to them, but a lot of times because of the collapse and the immediate pressure, guys weren't able to really show their ability to create separation and get out there. But because of that, the Baltimore Ravens said, hey, we're going to figure it out. We're going to make sure that we cross all of our T's and dot our I's, and let's get a more proper level of different wide receivers. Let's get the big guys. Let's get the slow guys. Let's get the tall guys. Let's get the little jitter bugs. Let's get every variation that we need to be able to attack multiple levels. And I do think this Ravens wide receiver group, Sam, is very well rounded. I think you do have a little bit of everything here. I think those comments are interesting though, because I think at the end of the day, like it kind of shares what they were thinking on how Baltimore's offense was last season, and didn't seem like that was something that was held in the high regard, I would say.
No, not at all. I think, and we've talked about this before, the offense was definitely predictable. The Ravens definitely love to play between the numbers. Another team that likes to throw it on the outside. When Lamar Jackson has the opportunity to throw it on the outside, he's had success, but there have been few and far between because, one, the offense wasn't built to have guys, and the Ravens didn't really have guys to throw outside the numbers, and therefore it was a limited amount of success, limited amount of opportunities, limited amount of attempts for Lamar Jackson. That's one. Two, you mentioned it, the archetypes of receivers you had. Definitely didn't have the wide array of talent to kind of make your offense multifaceted. That has definitely changed via the draft now. Zay Flowers, definitely the #1 wide receiver, but with Declan Doyle, you're going to see a more prolific, a more versatile offense where different guys are going to have different opportunities depending on the situation. So I agree with Steve Smith completely here. I think they changed their format. They changed the way they're going to draft these receivers. They changed the room in general. So Elijah Surratt, Jacoby Lane brought in as well, Tez Walker. You know, these guys are going to be given opportunities depending on the situation. It's only going to help this offense grow. But Declan Doyle is going to come in here, not going to be between the numbers as much because the philosophy is changing, no more running. Play action is going to really play huge dividends, especially on the outside where the Ravens had, again, limited opportunities. They're going to be much more spread, which is what Lamar Jackson and these receivers want, which should mean more opportunities, more numbers for these guys.
Yeah. And I think that it will benefit everybody. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that, you know, you have a lot of youth in that room, but I do think that, you know, with that comes some advantages, which I think like I would have predicted before the draft, like I mentioned before, Baltimore would have added a veteran. But again, it is like the skill sets are just as like if you had brought in a veteran that didn't have the skill set that you needed, it would have been redundant. And it probably like it'd be cool to have a guy with experience, but like you wouldn't have had what you actually needed for your roster. I think all across the board, Baltimore did a good job of at least getting the skill sets in that were necessary. And he also, just continuing on the conversation about Zay Flowers and, obviously Steve Smith over on 89 with what they were talking about over there. I do think it was interesting because there was another quote and Steve Smith saying, quote, well, of course you want to see a lot more movement when you're a number one wide receiver. You're going to get the most attention. So movement is paramount and extremely important. You got to move me around. You got to put me in different positions so I can be successful. So teams can't lock in and always know where you're going to line up every single play, because if you have that, that makes it extremely difficult. But the real answer to what can unlock Zay Flowers has to be everybody else around him. It has to be other wide receivers. Rashod Bateman. I've said it over and over again. I've been maybe a little bit too critical of him, but I see watching him come out of Minnesota, I expected automatically to carry over because of his speed, and it really hasn't carried over into being extremely productive as your true X wide receiver who is stationary stand, who can win off the release, who can go across the middle. He hasn't gone across the middle as consistently as you would like. He's growing into that role, but as he's growing into that role, it's also affecting a guy like Zay Flowers and company because of not having that now mentality, not having that impact where defense is going, oh my gosh, our X wide receiver, we must fear him. They don't have that. So I agree with this a lot. Like, I think part of the reason why the Declan Doyle offense will be so successful is because I think he's going to get more receivers involved here, but it also is on those guys to step up, because with Zay, I don't think there are any questions for me, but the guys below him, I think there's a ton of potential. I can see the vision of them being successful, but there are questions about like, okay, can they step up? Can they bounce back? Can they take on bigger roles? And if they can, the attention moves off of Zay, which is going to help him produce even further.
Yeah, I won't put too much negativity on Sam Njoku because I think he did do a decent job of motioning Zay Flowers. I think he was ranked third in terms of receiving yards, winning in motion. So I think they did a good job with Zay, but I think the other receivers, as you mentioned, they need to be able to step up. We know who the guys are that are going to get the opportunities first, but there's also rookies out there that can come in and potentially make big plays too. Declan Doyle, again, has the mindset. This offense, this team has the mindset to get multiple guys involved, and that's why it's such a breath of fresh air to have multiple players who we believe can potentially big play guys. And we don't got T. Higgins and Jamar Chase out there, obviously, but there is definitely a pool of talent there that can possibly come in and step up if need be. It's just going to be up to them to make that noise in training camp in the preseason. But yeah, I think this Declan Doyle offense is going to be completely different. And having these receivers, all of them, each and every single one of them, I think 1 through 7, 1 through 6, whichever, 6 make it, could all be big time players for this offense moving forward.
Yep. The risk is real with this group, but at the same time, the reward is also very real. And I think that they just really want to see what they have in these guys, because they've been bringing in these vets, as I've talked about a ton, where it's just like it takes snaps away from these guys that you want to see. Okay, do we have something? But then you sign a vet, you promise them a certain role. Sometimes they delivered on that, I guess, and sometimes they didn't. Maybe I think DeAndre Hopkins probably expected a little bit more last year, but I think this year it's very much like, hey, Tez, like we want to see who you are in a bigger role. Rashod, we want to see you bounce back. And bringing in a vet, while I think would have provided a higher floor for them, which I just don't think they're going to go out there and get a guy like Stephon Diggs at this point, because I think their whole mindset this offseason was, hey, let's go out there and see what we have on that football field. And then if it doesn't work, then maybe at the trade deadline you can address it. Maybe there's a free agent out there. But for now, I think I feel like they feel pretty confident in their group right now. Coming up, though, in the final part of the show, continue this conversation, then also get into Eric DeCosta's comments on Nnamdi Madubuike. I want to get Sam's opinion on that. Stay tuned. Got a lot coming up here on Locked On Ravens. Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher, Sam Njoku, still here with you on this Friday edition of the show. Again, thanks for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. Now, Sam, with this Steve Smith Sr. conversation, him dishing in on the Ravens wide receiver core itself, one of the more interesting comments was on the rookies, I would say. And, he talked a little bit about Tez Walker in this conversation as well, who's a third-year player, but he said, quote, so the Baltimore Ravens said, hey, we love our young guys, but we want to add some younger guys that can maybe push some of these other guys to step up. And I believe Tez Walker has received the message, but here's what the Baltimore Ravens are saying. Tez, if you see this message and you're ready to play, we're all there. We'll make some times. But Jacoby Lane for USC, he's a good rookie, massive body control, can get the ball, all basketball player out there. He becomes now their big target. He also mentioned Elijah Surratt in there, highly productive. He said knows exactly how to play football. And then also talked about Rashod Bateman. And so he said, quote, think about it. They're saying we're gonna get a guy who will eventually either take over and hit that intermediate route running, or if the guy we have there isn't, we're gonna get a cheaper version who will do it consistently. So it's like they have options. Like there are layers to it, right? I think that's what Steve Smith Sr. was alluding to there is like certain years, Sam, there just hasn't been the depth that's been needed, where if a guy went down, they were kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. Like there wasn't really a lot that they could pivot to. I feel like this year, like again, knock on wood, an injury doesn't happen at that spot, but we know it's football and anything can happen. Like if someone were to go down, like, yes, you do now have Jacoby Lane who can step in to be a wide receiver 3. You do have Elijah Surratt who can do that for you as well. Even LeJontay Wester, who I think has been underrated throughout this entire process, there might be a role for him as well. So I think that they have just increased, it might not be like the biggest star power receiver room out there, but I do think the depth is solid, which honestly I think benefits them a ton.
Oh, yeah. I love the depth here. I do love the depth. I know Cordell of 105.7 got a little bit of trouble saying that if this is going to be a Super Bowl team, they need to add a veteran receiver. And I get that. I get that because right now the Ravens are in a situation where you want to find out who your guys are. I mean, I don't want to go way overboard with this, but I remember in 2018 when Lamar Jackson was in the postseason against the Chargers, and the Chargers were just giving it to the Ravens offense, and everyone wanted the Ravens to pivot to Joe Flacco in the middle of the game, and John Harbaugh refused. I think that was probably, in my opinion, the best coaching move that John Harbaugh made. This is a very similar situation in the fact that let's see what these guys have. Let's see what Rashod Bateman has. How many years has it been that Rashod Bateman's been with the Ravens? Very inconsistent. Tez Walker, we've talked about him being the next guy up, the rising star. Let's find out. Let's not take away from these guys by bringing in a veteran. And, oh, yeah, if you guys don't step up, we don't bring in a veteran. We got 2 rookies that are going to be standout guys. Elijah Surratt, a guy that can go in the middle, make the big tough catch, something that Rashod Bateman hasn't shown he can do consistently in the past. We know Jacoby Lane, big target guy, a guy that can replace Zay Likely. This is the notion. This is what good GMs do. Get cheap guys, come in there, perform highly, have 4 or 5 good years, get your big contract. But right now, this is put up or shut up time for Rashod Bateman. Maybe not so much for Tez Walker, but if Tez Walker wants to take that next step, it's now or never because they got 2 hungry guys and Jacoby Lane and Elijah Surratt ready to step up and step to the plate.
Yeah. Yep. I'm really excited. And again, with what the Ravens have at that position now, I think they're just better equipped to handle a full season at this point.
Yes.
Like I remember in that Buffalo game in 2024 when, Zay was already out, Rashod Bateman goes down. Lamar led that team down the field with Tylan Wallace out there. And no disrespect, obviously, but it's just like, like now you're going to have a lot more options, I feel like, in that case. And Lamar was still able to do it with those guys. It was 3 plays or whatever, and he was boom, he's in the end zone. But
yep.
I mean, now it makes Lamar's job easier, to have these different skill sets on the field and guys that can continue to grow with him for sure. So lots of awesome comments there from Steve Smith Sr. about the Ravens wide receiver group in general. Let's talk about Nnamdi Madubuike a little bit, Sam. I talked about this on Locker Ravens PM, but I want to get your opinion on it and just kind of what Eric DeCosta had to say, because the Ravens, whether it was John Harbaugh during his time towards the end there before he got fired or DeCosta, other people in the Ravens, very non-committal in terms of Nnamdi Madubuike. Some of the updates we've gotten that have been pretty positive have been, through media, whether it be national, some local, like all that type of stuff. But Eric DeCosta was on 105.7 The Fan with Cordell Woodland and Vinny Serrato. And Eric DeCosta gave what I thought was a very positive update and a very intriguing one. He said, quote, Nnamdi's a little bit more unclear, I would say, because he was first talking about Teddy Buchanan and how well he's doing in his rehab. But then he said, quote, I think everything looks to be pointing in the right direction, but you're talking about a different type of injury, a different type of circumstance. I'm excited about where Nnamdi is, and I think we'll have more information in the coming weeks. Like in the next 2 weeks, I think we'll have a lot more information that we'll be able to share with people. And he also said he was optimistic about both guys. So that also was something positive. So it seems like we'll get some sort of new info like that. I'm kind of like waiting. It's like a countdown now. Like, all right, hey, what are we going to get in 2 weeks? Right, lining up right about with training camp. So I would assume that maybe that's the timeline of when we'll get, maybe it's the answer, or maybe it's just another update on the situation. What were your initial reactions when you heard the comments?
I had a couple of reactions. My first reaction was it could be a countdown to whether or not he goes on the pup list. It could be one of those things where is he well enough to be on the well enough to miss being on the physically unable to perform list, or is he one of those guys where you say, you know what, we'll have him in, we'll work him with the individual drills and all that, but he's not ready for team activities yet. Let's put him on the pup list and see where he's at in the middle of the season, or not. And of course, obviously, the best case scenario is that he's full go. He talks to reporters. He says, tough injury, but I'm here now. I'm 100%. Let's go. That's the best case scenario. But that's kind of where my head's at. I'm no longer in the realm of, oh, he's never going to play football again. I think that all signs are pointing to him at least making an attempt for it. But my first mindset was, could this be a pup list announcement coming up or not? My second thought is probably the more prominent thought is we really don't know what the injury is up until now. We know it's a neck injury. We just don't know what type of neck injury it is. We know if it's a knee injury, sooner or later we find out it's an ACL tear. If it's a foot injury, find out whether or not it's a bruise or a breaking of a toe or whatnot. We don't know what type of injury it is. Therefore, I cannot pinpoint what the severity of this is. Obviously, it's severe enough where his career was questioned, but we still don't even know what type of injury it was. So that's something to think about as we get ready for this training camp, as we get answers. But definitely a good sign if you're a Ravens fan to hear your GM come on the radio and say that he's pretty optimistic about where things are headed. Obviously, not given 100% certainty, but definitely better than where we were maybe 6 or 7 months ago.
Yeah. And a lot of uncertainty back then. And again, I don't think this was like, there's not a bad thing I can take away from this unless, they're preparing some retirement announcement, which I mean, based off his comments, I do not think that's what's happening. Yeah. But again, we just do not know. It could go one way, could go the other way. Been very non-committal about the situation, but I do think this is the most positive update we've gotten from Eric DeCosta and the most intriguing one, because again, it does kind of start that clock in terms of like, ooh, what is that announcement information that's going to come in 2 weeks? I mean, obviously, Sam, if Nnamdi feels confident, the doctors feel confident, and he wants to go back out there and play, obviously that's a really big deal because he'll help out the Ravens a ton, but obviously his health comes first. And, I mean, we've seen the workout videos. We've seen him grinding this offseason. So, I mean, it certainly feels like he's been preparing for a comeback. But again, we're not going to know until we get the official announcement one way or the other. But Sam, I appreciate you. Thanks so much for hopping on the show. Before I get you out of here, please tell people where they can find you and what you're working on.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Ravens Soccer Podcast. We're inching in to the start of training camp and preseason, then the regular season. New show will be out. New show will be out next week. We'll have a show out next week to get set for training camp. So stay tuned for that. You can also catch me on the Locked On Ravens Squad Show with your boy Kevin and Q. We talk every Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. And then as soon as the preseason starts, we're back to twice a week. So look forward for you guys coming on the show and chatting up with us.
Go support Sam wherever he is. Links will be in the description down below. Sam, I appreciate you again. Thanks so much. And thank you to everybody who watched and listened today to Locked On Ravens. Coming up, we'll be back here for the 6 p.m. edition of the show at 6 p.m. And then maybe if there's some headlines, we'll talk about them on bonus episodes over the weekend. But if not, we'll be back here on Monday talking more Ravens football with you. So be sure to stay tuned. And I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.